So yesterday I was talking about how that we can be in situations where people are saying negative and ugly things about us, and part of the reality is if what they're saying is true, then we need to confess it and ask for their forgiveness. But the problem is that oftentimes that doesn't happen if for no other reason the person doesn't come to you and share their feelings. They go to other people and they basically create this kind of vibe where people want to distance themselves from you and terminate their relationship. And then other people are dealing with information that was secondhand, not something they know for themselves. And when that happens, you realize you have to understand that this is a person who doesn't want a relationship and probably has a pattern of broken or at least shallow relationships, that if you get below the depth and into the real nitty-gritties of their life, they're going to create all sorts of distance because they have stuff that they just don't want to work through. And that's where I think when you get in a situation where you want to be reconciled to somebody, but you can't be reconciled. And that's why Paul said in Romans chapter 13, he says, as much as lies within you, live at peace with all men. You see, because Paul recognized that if someone doesn't want to live peaceably with you, you can't live peaceably with them. And I've always found that, if somebody is a friend, then what they do is they do whatever they can to try to redeem a relationship. And if their response is simply just to terminate the relationship, then you realize that they were never really your friend in the first place. That any kindnesses they showed you had an ulterior motivation, and you're probably better off not pursuing that relationship. This is hard for most people because so many of us we've had codependent personalities. I mean, we desperately want to be liked and to have approval of other people. And so we'll go out of our way to make people like us. But you have to understand that you can't cast your pearls before swine. You know, that the idea of a swine isn't that you're calling these people pigs, but the thing is a pig doesn't see the value of the pearl. And so what the pig does is he'll trample them into the mud because he doesn't see anything of value. And then when you press him, he'll attack you out of self-defense. And that's often happens with people who are impossible to reconcile with. They don't see value in the relationship. They're not interested in the relationship. And it's easier for them to terminate the relationship than it is to go through the tough work, of fixing a broken relationship. And so they just trample it under their feet. And if you press it, they just get angrier and angrier and angrier. So the better thing, really, the wiser thing is just to let it off, let it go, and leave it in God's hands, knowing that someday God's going to deal with it, but you can't fix it. And that's what I think that many of us have to get past, the idea that we're able to fix every problem, reconcile every dispute. We can't. It's basically, I remember years ago where there was somebody who was really in a very aggressive way besmirching my reputation in the mission field. And they were very threatened by me and wanted to pretty much do whatever they could to hinder my influence. And it was really a really strange thing. And I was praying about it and asking God, how do I respond to this? Because there was a part of me that just wanted to go out and fire back, that he sent out this defamatory letter and I wanted to respond with my own letter. And God just very quietly told me to let it go. And the thing that came into my mind, the thought came to my mind, I think that God was saying to me is, you can't have a tug of war if you don't pick up the end of the other end of the rope. And he just ministered to me. He says, let them drag that rope along as they want. Sooner or later, people are just going to go, why are you doing this? Why can't you let this go? Why can't you move on? Why do you continue to have to do this? And sadly, what happened is that person lost their ministry. I mean, they just lost their ministry. It went away. And in contradiction, I didn't. So I say that because I just say it's really better. In fact, Paul says, or Peter says here in verse 17, he says, it is better if it's God's will to suffer for doing good than for doing evil. That you will suffer when you do good. And we have in our mind this idea that if I do something good, that means that everything's going to work out well and good will come of it. And that's simply not true. Because we have an enemy who will do anything to discourage us from doing good. And many times you will find that you'll be standing there and you'll say, these are the wounds that I received in the house of my friends. That Jesus was betrayed by his disciples. I mean, Judas betrayed him with a kiss, and somehow we think that we're not going to have those same kind of dynamics come into our lives. It's really important that we understand that our obligation is to strive to do good, to respond in the proper way. And if we suffer because of it, we should rejoice, because that's part of carrying our cross for Christ. The danger is that we'll slip into and begin to mimic the same kind of behavior. We'll want to begin to besmirch those people, talk about how bad they are, talk about the evil they've done, blah, 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 blah. Now, does that mean that you can never defend yourself? Well, no. I mean, if defending yourself requires you to lie, or which is basically that you admit to something you didn't do, which is a lie, or if you take responsibility for something you didn't do, that's not what he's talking about here. If you're being accused of doing something that you didn't do, then don't take that, don't accept that, and don't be afraid if you have the opportunity to explain that, no, that's not what happened, here's what took place. But we need to understand that the nature of evil men is that they will always treat others unfairly. I find myself suddenly sometimes getting very frustrated when I listen to the verbiage that goes out regarding political events in our country today, and these people who have voices into the culture saying all sorts of things that they know aren't true. It reminds me of what Solzhenitsyn said about the Soviet Union. He said they lied to us. We know they lied to us. They know that they lied to us, but they still lie to us. And we're kind of in that dynamic in our culture now, where we have all these people, these talking heads on TV and throughout the media, that are telling us all this stuff, and we've watched them change the narrative over and over again, but they act like they haven't. And what happens is that, yes, Solomon said in Proverbs that oppression drives a righteous man crazy. So that when you see people trying to oppress other people's opinions and their will and so forth by twisting, perverting, and corrupting what's been said and changing the narrative to fit the moment that they happen to be in, or whatever agenda they happen to be pursuing, it can begin to drive you crazy. And that's important that we recognize that, because that's exactly what the enemy wants to happen. He wants us to become these angry, reactive people who begin flailing and saying all sorts of things and thinking evil thoughts and pondering how we're going to settle the score, when God very clearly says to us repeatedly, "Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, let me repay." It's important to do that when people are saying bad things about you, and I pray that that doesn't happen very often in your life, but if they are, that you just let it go, that you don't hang on to it, that you don't feel it's like your responsibility to go out and change the narrative and set the record right. Speak the truth of love. I think that one of the biggest mistakes we make is when we try to get out there and say, that's not what happened, let me tell you the way it really was, because you're not going to be completely right either. You see, memory is kind of dangerous, because memory is a wonderful thing, but it also, we know that it has the capacity to be creative. And one of the reasons that hypnosis is not used in criminal cases is because hypnosis taps into memories, and those memories can be accurate, but they also can be inaccurate. We can recall things differently than they actually happened. I mean, it's the kind of thing that the further I get away from the event, the better I look and the worse other people look. And so the more I feel comforted by my own narrative. I was telling a story on Sunday morning before I got into my message, and I was trying to illustrate something about a worship song. And I shared this story, which is really kind of I thought a wonderful story. And I looked at the brother who was leading worship that Sunday, and I said, I got that story right, didn't I? And he looked at me and kind of went, well, basically. I just started laughing, because this is what my wife tells me all the time. He said, that's not exactly how it happened. And as I one time was speaking at church, and I told a story about what happened to me and a friend when we were in Russia, and afterwards I asked him, I said, did I get that story right? And he said, no, but I liked your version better. To be honest, I thought I had recalled it accurately. And it wasn't like it was completely off base, but there were details that weren't quite accurate. And so, or maybe quite the way he remembered it. Either way, we have to understand that if one of the things it says, don't get upset when you find a man besmirching you, because he said you'll find that you've done it to other people as well. So it's just a simple reality, and I think that one of the ways we can keep ourselves out of a lot of trouble is by not feeling like we need to settle the score or straighten everything out and get everybody on the same narrative. The only time we do that is we bring people back to the Word of God and let the Holy Spirit work in people's hearts. I hope this made sense. We'll continue tomorrow. Blessings.